Hey everybody, it's Pastor John with your Midweek Moment for this week. And this week I would like to spend a couple of moments talking to you about the wonder of the Interstate Highway System. I was thinking about this because when I woke up this morning, I was in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I went down for a couple of days to help take care of my dad as he continues to recover from his stroke. And he's actually doing spectacularly well. Thanks for asking. But when I woke up this morning, I was in Bethlehem. I left his house, I guess 7:45 in the morning. And I took Pennsylvania Route 33 to Interstate 78. I took 78 to 287, 287 to 684, the 684 to 84, and then, of course, here in Connecticut, I picked up good old Route 7, and I was back at church in time for my office hours this morning. Which, if you stop to think about it, is kind of a remarkable thing. Being able to get all the way from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania to Kent, Connecticut that easily and in that little time. In fact, on the way, I even stopped off once to get gas and once again to start to get breakfast, and I still got here around 11 in the morning. And if I'd been on vacation, I could have left my dad's house and I could have driven to Pittsburgh or Boston, or Chicago, or Dallas, or Denver, or Seattle, or Los Angeles, or Atlanta, or Miami. In fact, if I'd wanted to, I could have even driven to Montreal, or Toronto, or Vancouver. And the fact of the matter is, you can wake up this morning, or any morning in Kent, or Sharon, or wherever it is you live, and get into your car, hop on the interstate, and you can drive practically anywhere in North America. Which is something that our grandparents certainly couldn't do. In fact, if you're old enough, you can probably remember it's something that your parents couldn't even do. It's a remarkable thing, but something, I suppose, that we all tend to take for granted. In the same way we take for granted all the people who make highways and roads possible. I mean, there were people who designed the highways, people who build the highways, people who maintain the highways, people who plow the snow off the highways in the wintertime. They do all of that so that we can get from one place to another and do what we have to do. But I have no idea who any of those people are. I would imagine it took the efforts of literally thousands of people to get me from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania to Kent, Connecticut this morning. But like I said, most times I just take all those people and all the work they do for granted. And it's not just that the highway system moves us around. I mean, it moves all the stuff that we depend on too. The food and the grocery stores, the clothes and the shoes, and all of those things travel by truck. I just read this morning, it was after I got here, an article in the New York Times that said 70% of all the merchandise in the United States travels at one point or another on the Interstate Highway System. That's 70% of the stuff that you use every day. But like I said, it's just something that we take for granted. In fact, if you think about it, it's one of a lot of things we use every day that we take for granted. And I think we all take for granted the fact that when we flick the switch, the lights are going to come on, or we take for granted that when our houses get too cold, the furnace is going to warm them up again. We take for granted that when we turn on the TV, there's going to be a picture there. When we turn our computers, that our computers will do, that they'll do whatever computers do. We just take for granted that that's how things are going to work. And then, like I said, we tend to take for granted all of the thousands and thousands of people whose work make all of those things possible. I suppose, to one degree, that's just human nature. We all have a tendency to take things for granted. And I suppose the more frequently we use something, and the more easier, or I would say the easier it is to use, the more likely we are to take it for granted. But it's not just things like the highways and the electricity and all that stuff that we can take for granted. We can take our relationships with other people for granted as well. Sometimes we can take our friends or our family members for granted. After all, they've always been there for us. They've been there for us for so long that it's easy sometimes, I suppose, to assume that they're always going to be there. Once again, I guess sometimes taking other people for granted is just It's just a human thing to do. But the fact that it's a human thing to do doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. I think we'd all be better people. We'd probably be happier people as well if we took a little bit more time to be grateful for some of the things that we take for granted in our lives. In fact, let me close this week by giving you a little challenge. Let me challenge you to think of one thing that you take for granted and one person who you take for granted. And maybe this week spend some time being grateful for both of them. I'm grateful this morning for the Interstate Highway System, since it got me from Pennsylvania to Connecticut so quickly. And I can think of some people I'm grateful for as well. And when you think of that person you're grateful for, why don't you let them know? Why don't you tell them just how much you appreciate them and how much you appreciate the effect they have on your life? Because like I said, it may be a human thing to take things for granted, but it's not necessarily a good thing, and it's not something that we have to do. Thanks a lot.